Welcome everybody. Good evening, and welcome to this RC Psych webinar on applying to higher training 2025. My name is Declan Hyland. I'm the college's Associate Dean for Psychiatry and Recruitment, and I'll be chairing the webinar this evening. So just a couple of housekeeping rules to start with, if that's okay. So this session is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the college website following the webinar this evening. We're obviously keen to get as many questions as possible from you guys and to get through as many of them as we can. So please do use the Q&A function to post any questions that you have. Some people sometimes put them in using the chat function, and we might miss them that way. So please do use the Q&A function if you've got any questions. We may try and answer one or two of them during the talks, but we do have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. You can use a thumbs up function on a question, and this hopefully will help us stop. This will hopefully help us stop getting repeats of the same question. So do use the thumbs up function, and obviously we'll try and get through all the questions if we can. But if there aren't questions we can't get through, we will aim to publish the answers to those questions on the college website alongside the recording. We're hoping to do this as soon as possible, hopefully within the next week or two. You can ask questions anonymously, so you don't have to post your name and where you're from. There are staff answering questions in the Q&A box, so your question may be answered actually in the Q&A box, so do look out for that. We're not issuing certificates of attendance for the webinar this evening. This is more an information giving webinar than anything else. So we're going to crack straight on with the programme so that we have enough time for the questions. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome our first speaker, who is Dr. Paul Emerson, and he's going to be talking a little bit for the next 10 minutes about the ST4 Psychiatry Recruitment Overview. So without further ado, I will hand over to Paul. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Declan. So if the guys put my slides up, for some reason I can't control my slides on the Zoom, so I'm going to have to ask Lizzie to do my slides for me, which will be a little bit clunky, but we'll have to live with it. There we go. Thank you, Lizzie. If you can just move on. So I'm doing sort of a brief overview, but I'm going to concentrate on the self-assessment and the interview parts of the assessment process, because I think that's the bits that give people kind of problems. So next slide, please. So just in terms of the assessment, at the moment, the assessment split into three parts: your CASC mark, which is obviously you can't do much about that after the fact, and then self-assessment and interview. At the moment, self-assessment is 17.5%, interviews 32.5%, and CASC is 50%. There's been some discussion about whether that's the right way around things. I think from my point of view, CASC is the bit which gives us the most information. It's obviously much more in depth, so I think it's right that that probably has a slightly larger point, but we have equalized the self-assessment and interview scores, which should be starting the August 2026 recruitment. So they'll be worth 25% each. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of the interview is an online interview where you'll have two interviewers. You'll be asked to talk through two scenarios which are available ahead of time. It's not much of a secret that they've been the same scenario since we started the interview process. One on managing a complex case and one on working within a stretched system. The interviewers have structured questions and probes. We kind of came up with this system during COVID because we couldn't do face-to-face interviews anymore. We tested the interviews on some trainees, and what we found was actually they worked really well in terms of the trainees who'd got extra experiences and had done extra things. Were able to bring that experience into the interviews a lot and sort of be able to give examples in their own practice, which meant that the trainees who'd got a bit more extra experience or different things were able to kind of do that. And what we've seen since we brought in the interviews is that the scores have not improved over time. So given that we've been using these for about 5 years, you'd expect people's experience of them to mean that the scores are improving. But actually they haven't done that, which means really that they're testing what we want them to test. They're not things that you can excessively prepare for or download learned answers from the internet for. So they actually are quite effective. And also if you look at the scores in comparison to the CASC and the self-assessment, they correlate well. So which means that If we have a good candidate, we'd expect them to do reasonably well on all 3 parts. So they correlate well from that side, but they do actually add something extra. So they're not exactly testing exactly the same thing. So the interview's there. Next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. Next slide. Skip one. In terms of self-assessment, I'm going to spend a bit more time on this because I think this is the bit that people probably could do better. Having looked at self-assessment over the last few years, I can see that people make some really simple mistakes that they could easily get around. So self-assessment uses a separate system to the applications. Louise will talk a bit more about the application process later. Self-assessment looks complex, but actually is quite straightforward. The key to self-assessment is what you're trying to do is provide objective, verifiable evidence that you have achieved a thing. And there's a really clear guide that goes along with this, which tells you how to do it. And it tells you what the domains are, what sort of evidence you should be looking to upload, and really importantly, the minimum and maximum numbers of pieces of evidence that you need. Okay, next slide. So these are self-assessment domains: undergraduate training, prizes and awards, postgrad qualifications, postgraduate training, leadership roles, clinical governance, research, teaching, publications, presentations, and posters. And what you need to do is look at these, and they've got descriptors in each of these kind of categories of what we're looking for and what will score you points. And what we want you to do is pick something from your kind of portfolio of things which best shows your experience in these things, and then provide some evidence of what you've done, and then give yourself a score based on the scoring system. Next slide, please. So people ask sort of various different questions. So do you need to put something in every domain? No, you don't need to put something in every domain, but certainly it's going to help you if you manage to get things in more. Should you over or underscore? This is something which people really worry about, because within the kind of guidance, it talks a bit about probity and things like that. I always say to people, look, you can't lie, but if you're between 2 scores, if you think, well, is this a 4? Is this a 3? A lot of people tend to underscore themselves because they worry about probity. And I would say, look, if you're worrying about like a single point, I would tend to overscore. If you think that is the if you think that you're really between those 2, the marker might take you down a point, and that's fine. But you know, there's no kind of problem with that. In all the time that I've looked at people's applications, I've never really got concerned about someone having a probity issue. Usually if I've marked somebody down, it's because I can see that they sort of are somewhere between 2, essentially. Can you use the same thing in different domains? Yes, you can, but you must use different pieces of evidence, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Next slide. So advice: get your evidence together as early as possible. What you'll tend to see when you're going through people's evidence is that there are some people who are scrabbling around on the deadline date, trying to get something which shows something they've done. What we're asking for are things like signed letters from your supervisors, showing that you've done something. So you might have done a research paper a couple of years ago, and you might need to get a signed letter from the research supervisor. We know that's going to be difficult to do, so I'd really give advice of looking at what you're going to try and put into your folder as early as possible, so you can start chasing it up. The second point now, where I've put do not upload too much evidence. This is the really important one. When you look at the guides, it will tell you the maximum numbers of pieces of evidence that you can put in each section. Do not go over that. So what we're asking you to do is pick one project or one thing, one piece of evidence, and upload that. So if you've done 15 audit projects, we don't want to see 15 audit projects. Some of our assessors are looking at 20 or 30 people's evidence, and they're not going to be interested in 15 audit projects. We want you to pick your best one and upload the evidence relating to that best thing. If you upload, and I was looking at somebody's application this year who had uploaded more than 100 pieces of evidence, for the audit section, they had uploaded evidence for 4 different audit projects. And the assessor had said, I'm not looking at that. They had looked at the first 3 pieces of evidence, because that domain says upload 3 pieces of evidence, which didn't really give any points. And the candidate was very annoyed that they didn't get any points, but we had to say, look, you can't do this. You can't just upload 10 pieces of evidence and expect us to make our way through them. So choose your best project or your best thing and upload a piece of evidence related to that. Try and make things easy for your assessor, because they may be assessing loads of these, and they don't necessarily have time to trawl through loads and loads of complex things which are out of order and very difficult to interpret. So try and look at what you're uploading and think to yourself, does this make sense? Without me explaining it, does this make sense to somebody who's never met me before? And try and think about that and try and make it easy for your assessor. And one thing I would say is putting 3 pieces of evidence into one PDF and uploading it does not make it 1 piece of evidence. That's still 3 pieces of evidence. You've just put it into 1 PDF. Next slide, please. So here's an example. So one of my trainees, and she's given me permission to give this. So I can see that only 1 piece of evidence could be uploaded for leadership roles. I've been a wellbeing lead for psychiatry trainees in our health board, but also a leader in girl guiding. Is it better to have more variety in evidence? Are you choosing girl guiding as I'll be using the wellbeing project in other domains? Going to the next slide. So here we go. Leadership roles. So this is someone who says they've held the leadership role at a local level for 6 months. So if you expand that, next slide, it gives you the evidence that you might put in. So it says specifically it doesn't need to be just in psychiatry. Anything else can be used as well, such as being on the board of governors, and a leadership role in girl guiding would count. And they've asked for a letter on headed paper from the organisation confirming the nature and duration of the role. And it says piece of evidence required 1. So that means if you upload more than 1 document, the assessor may not look at it. So yes, you pick one of the 2 projects and you upload documentation relating to that. So next slide. The person has then used the same QI project for a later thing. So I suggested to that person actually, use the girl guiding one, because what you don't want to do is then find that you can't use your evidence later on. If you've got 2 pieces of evidence that are kind of equal, then use the one that doesn't sort of cover other things essentially. So this person has then done a QI project on resilience and well-being, but they've also presented this at the Royal College Congress on a poster, and wanted to know if they could use them in both. Essentially, they had got some other audit projects and they could use, but it wasn't quite as good. Next slide, please. So this is the guidance for the audit project, and it asks for 3 pieces of evidence. What they ask for is written confirmation from the audit lead, and also evidence of the change that you provided. So to do that, usually we're expecting something like a PowerPoint presentation or an audit report. So for this trainee, if you skip on to the next slide, please. They also wanted to use it as a presentation, and if you go into the next slide. In the presentation, it says that you can use an audit QI pre-project here, but only if it's not locally presented. So essentially, we're looking for extra things. So an audit would normally expect to be presented locally. If you've then gone on to present it nationally, then you can use that national presentation as your kind of for that thing as well. So for this trainee, I suggested to her that she use a girl guiding thing for leadership, and that she use her sort of well-being audit in the audit section, because she could show that she made change, local changes from that, and that also she could use her presentation in the presentation part, but that she should use the audit report and the information from her supervisor for the audit section, and then the poster and the evidence from the International Congress, the acceptance letter from the International Congress, in the presentation section. So that was how I tried to help her make the most of the piece of evidence that she had put in. Next slide, please. We'll skip through this time. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So we talked a little bit in our recruitment board last time we met about some of the common mistakes that we were seeing, and these are some of the things that came up. And these are things which, from an assessor point of view, really frustrate you, because sometimes you can see that the trainee has done something good, but just hasn't managed to put the right things in, and they lose the marks. Uploading more than the required number of documents, that is the one that really winds assessors up, because they just end up with piles and piles of stuff to go through. Uploading inappropriate documents. All the documents that we want are described in the guidance, essentially, and things outside of that. So I've had people uploading screenshots of text messages, random emails which don't have anyone's names on. You can't just kind of upload anything and expect the assessor to accept it, essentially. Uploading documents in the wrong domain. Occasionally you'll have a really kind assessor who will kind of figure that one out, but sometimes it's really not clear. Duplicating documents in various sections, it's very clear that you can't use the same piece of evidence twice. You can maybe use the same project, like I talked about in the audit, but you have to use different pieces of evidence. Things like not having your name on a document, the documents being illegible, or forgetting to upload them at all. These are just really common things. Okay, next slide. And again, these are just some sort of things that people have kind of talked about, common things they see. In the undergraduate degrees, where you get extra marks for things like merits and distinctions, this is sometimes really difficult to prove. And like, you can't expect the assessors to know that 90 marks in your degree is equivalent to merit. So you think about how you sort of show some of those things. We have had some slightly weird ones. Somebody who uploaded evidence of being voted best dressed medical student for an undergraduate prize. You don't get points for that, I'm afraid. Postgraduate qualifications, particularly this time, I saw a few trainees who had done some very, very sort of sketchy online diplomas, and those things sort of don't count. I won't go through all these things. You can kind of read them, and I think we'll hand out the presentations later. So I will finish there. I think that's my last slide, and we'll obviously go into questions kind of later in the piece. But thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Paul. So we're going to move swiftly on to our next presenter. So we've got Louise Burrell from the National Recruitment Office and Phil Norris in the background as well to assist with any questions. So Louise is going to talk a little bit about the ST4 application process. So Louise, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Declan. So afternoon, everyone. My name's Louise Burrell. I work for NHS England, and I'm the recruitment manager for the ST4 psychiatry recruitment process. I'm just going to talk a little bit today about the overview of the application process. And next slide, please. So for the recruitment process for August 2026, we'll follow the exact same process used in the February and the August 25 recruitment rounds. So the process will be the same. As Paul touched on a moment ago, we've changed some of the weightings of the different elements, but the actual elements that we're using will be the same as in previous rounds. The process is based on the previous face-to-face framework that we used pre-2020. So it's made up of 3 elements in the selection process. So your total score at the end of the process will be made up of your verified self-assessment score, your online interview score, and then your adjusted CAS score. Next slide, please. So the application process works. You'll submit one single application, regardless of which ST4 subspecialty you want to apply for. So within the oral application process, you'll just apply to the general psychiatry vacancy. And at the time of application, you won't have to preference which specialties, subspecialties that you want to apply for. Later on in the process, you'll have the chance to preference posts that are available across all of the 6 subspecialties and then the 8 dual specialties as well. So that's done in the sort of March time of this process. So at the start, you'll just submit a generic application to a general psychiatry vacancy online. Next slide, please. So at this stage in the process, we've asked all the regions to give us their anticipated post numbers. So they've just supplied a minimum and a maximum range for each of the specialties and subspecialties and the locations at the moment. So all those indicative numbers are available on our website, and the link's been provided there. The final vacancy numbers aren't provided by regions until the point in which you preference, which will be March time next year. So as I say, at the moment, it's just a general range in each specialty in each region of what posts are anticipated to be available. Next slide, please. So for eligibility requirements, there's been one slight change for the August 26 recruitment process compared to previous years. So applicants now need to hold full registration with the General Medical Council at the time of your application. So in previous years, that you've needed to hold full registration with the GMC at the time that your post starts. For this recruitment round, you will need it at the time you apply. You won't need to have a current license to practice. You only need to have that on the date your post commences. But the application form in this round will ask for your GMC number, and it will the Oriel system links to the GMC register, so it will do a check at that time to check that you do hold full registration with the GMC. You also need to hold full MRC Psych by the post offer date. So the publicised post offer date for the August 26th recruitment round is the 14th of April. So that means that you need to have full MRC Psych by the 14th of April. And you also need to have evidence of achievement of core psychiatry competencies, which I'll go through in a little bit more detail in a moment as to what evidence you can use to evidence that. Next slide, please. So for MRC Psych, you can apply in this recruitment round because of the way the timings of the round work. You can apply without having full MRC Psych, but you can't start in post with it. So you will need to confirm to us at the time of application, if you don't hold full MRC Psych, that you have registered and have a place secured in the January 2026 diet to sit your CASC. This is because the CASC score will make up 50% of your overall application score. And so we need to have your final CASC score from the college in when the results are published in February. So you will need to confirm that you have got a place in the January 26 diet to be able to be eligible to apply in this recruitment round. Next slide, please. You'll be asked to demonstrate core competencies at the time of application. So the application form, it'll change the questions that it asks depending on the answers that you give. So if you state that you're currently in a UK core psychiatry training program, the application form will ask you to provide your NTN in the application form. The recruiting regions will then know if you accept a post when your application form is passed on. They'll know that as part of the pre-employment checks, they'll need evidence of your final CT3 ARCP that would have been issued by that time at that point in the process. If you've already completed UK core psychiatry training, the application form will ask you to provide and upload a copy of your final CT3 ARCP at that point. If you have any competencies outstanding on your final ARCP, you'll also be asked to evidence those as well. If you've been released from your final ARCP and you've got CASC outstanding, as long as you've either attached your CASC score or provided evidence that you'll be sitting CASC in the January 26 diet, that's absolutely fine. You don't need to provide any further information. If you were released from training after your final CT3 ARCP and had any other competency outstanding, we'll need evidence to show that that has been achieved since you've been working out of training. And then if you've not completed a UK core psychiatry training program, application form will prompt you to upload the alternative certificate for eligibility to enter higher psychiatry training. It's previously called the Certificate C. There's been absolutely no change to the actual form. The naming of it has just changed, that's all. Next slide, please. So the alternative certificate of eligibility to enter higher psychiatry training, or the Certificate C form, this lists the necessary core competencies required for progression to ST4. So it's defined in the core psychiatry training curriculum. There are links in the certificate that link to the current training curriculum online. For the August 26 intake, both the alternative certificate form and the August 23 version of the Certificate C can be accepted. Like I've just mentioned, both forms are identical. It's just that the naming convention has been changed going forward. So we can accept both versions of the form for the foreseeable future. And we've just provided a link there to the alternative certificate, and it is available on our website to download as well. Next slide, please. The online application, so you must submit an application via the Oriel system. The application window for ST4 higher applications opened this morning, and they will close on the 11th of December at 4 p.m. The application form will just ask the sort of personal information, it'll ask for your qualification and employment details, and it'll also ask for your MRC Psych status. And depending on the answers you give, it will ask you to upload certain documents. It'll ask for your referee details, and then the final part of the application form will be the 10 domains of the self-assessment listed with the different scores for each one, and you'll just be asked to score yourself as part of the application form for what scores you award yourself as part of the self-assessment. You won't be asked to upload any evidence at this time. That part of the process comes later and won't be done until March time, but you do need to score yourself as part of your application form. There's no white space box questions in the application, and then depending on the circumstances, you may need to provide supporting application form. The application form will prompt you if you do need to attach evidence. So if it doesn't ask you to attach anything, it means that the answers that you've given mean that you don't need to provide further information at this stage. Next slide, please. So initially, your application will be longlisted, just to check that you meet the relevant entry criteria. It won't be shortlisted. During the longlisting process, you might be contacted by the Psychiatry National Recruitment Office. They'll contact you via the Oriel system if they require further information or evidence from you. When we send a comms via Oriel, it will be sent to your Oriel account, and it'll also be sent to the email address that you've used to register with Oriel. So we ask that during the longlisting stage of the process that you do regularly check your Oriel account for updates, just on the off chance that the emails that have been sent by the system have gone into your spam or junk folders, just so you don't miss any key information from us. At the end of the longlisting process, which is likely to be very early in January 26th, or the first week of January, all eligible applicants will receive a message from us confirming if your application has been successfully longlisted. And if it has, we'll then invite you to attend an online interview, and you'll be provided with details at that stage of how to book your interview slot. Next slide. So there's certain bits of supporting information that you may be asked to provide during your application. And again, like I said previously, this is based on the answers that you provide. So it may be that you're not asked for any of this information. If you do indicate in your application that you require reasonable adjustments for the interviews, the application will then ask you to provide evidence to support this request. So it may be a sort of an educational psychologist report or something along those lines. In order for us to approve those requests, you will be required to upload that evidence for us to see. You can apply for special circumstances as part of the application. So if you're a primary carer for somebody who's disabled, or you've got a medical condition or a disability for which ongoing follow-up care is required in the region that you are currently in, you can submit a special circumstances form. So this form needs to be submitted directly to the central MDRS National Recruitment Team. It's not dealt with by the Psychiatry Recruitment Office. If you do answer yes to these questions in your application form, the form will prompt you to submit the special circumstances form, and it'll provide you with all the information and the email address of where to send it at that time as well. Next slide, please. And then based on your answers, there's two different support forms that you may be asked to submit. So a reapplication to specialty form. So if you've previously been released or resigned from a higher psychiatry training program, then the application form may ask you to submit that form. So if you, for example, started a general adult a training scheme at ST4 or above, and you resigned and you're applying to a different specialty, the application form will ask you just to submit that form. And likewise, if you are reapplying again to continue your higher training but within a different region of the UK, then the application form again will prompt you just to upload a slightly different form there. If you are prompted to upload those forms, it will provide you with links of where to complete those at the time. Next slide, please. And then there are 10 fitness to practice declaration questions in the application. If you answer yes to any of those, you'll be asked to submit a fitness to practice declaration. Those forms go to a confidential email address, and they will be reviewed and screened in the email address, and then your application will be updated as such. And then if you're not currently in a UK core psychiatry post, the application form will ask you to attach either your final ARCP or a Certificate C form to your application, depending on which answers that you do provide us with. Next slide, please. So just a table there, which I think Paul touched on in his presentation as well. So it's just to update that the percentage weightings for the 3 elements have changed this year. So verified self-assessment score will count for 25% of your total score. Your online interview will count for 25%, and your CASC score will count for 50%. Your CASC score will be adjusted so that we can compare CASC scores between diets. Of the 3 elements, only the online interview has a minimum score, so you must score at least 50% overall. which is 25 out of 50. But you must score a minimum score of 6 out of 20 on both Part A and Part B of the interview to be eligible and proceed to the next stage of the process. Next slide, please. And there's just a list there of the 10 self-assessment domains, but I won't go through those individually. I think Paul's covered most of those, and as he mentioned in his presentation, the full guidance is available on our website, which would strongly encourage everybody to have a read through before the upload windows, which will be in March. Next slide, please. So as part of the process, the scores that you do award yourselves, the evidence that you upload will be reviewed by a clinical assessor, which is a consultant psychiatrist. Please make sure that you score yourself accurately at the time of your application and go through the full evidence and guidance on our website. As I said before, you'll just be asked to score yourself at the time of application, and we won't actually ask you to upload your evidence until the evidence upload window, which is the 16th of February to the 2nd of March. And anybody that's long listed in the process, we will email you beforehand and give you all the information and information of how to do that and where to do that, and a reminder of all the timescales as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we invite you to interview in early January, you'll receive full guidance from us at that stage of the process on what to expect. And the interviews will all be held via an online recruitment system that we use called Cubicon Recruit. And your interview will be made up of 2 assessors, and there'll be potentially a lay representative as well. It'll involve 2 6-minute scenarios. We will publish the STEM questions in advance, and all candidates will be advised when those questions have been published on our website as well. The interviews do take a conversational approach, so we ask you to not script your responses. Only the STEM questions are published on the website, so you'll be asked further questions during the interview. You won't be allowed to just speak for 6 minutes. So there'll be a series of follow-up questions to the STEM questions that will be used as well. And there is a score as part of the total interview score for communication, and assessors are fully trained and briefed to bear in mind that sort of the changes in body language in an online environment. Next slide, please. So the online interview is designed to allow you to demonstrate your knowledge of core skills and attributes. It does provide a standardized interview process for our applicants. So the interview is the same regardless of which ST4 subspecialties you want to be considered for. So it's a generic interview, but you can use specialty specific examples during your answers if you wish to do so. Next slide, please. And then the adjusted CAS score. So the CAS scores will be adjusted to be comparable between diets and between days within the specific diets as well. So what we do is we use a pass mark of 50% for the recruitment process. And then so all applicants' CAS scores, once they've been adjusted, will be lower than your actual original CAS mark. So just as a very basic example there, if the pass mark on the day that you took CASC was 62.2% and you scored 62.2% to pass, your adjusted CAS score would be 50%. So if you have your CAS score at the time of the application, the application form will prompt you to upload that. So it'll ask you to upload your evidence for your result in oral when applying. If you do pass CASC in the January diet, and you find out your results in February, we'll ask you at that stage to send in your CASC evidence to us as well. Next slide, please. And then I think just a final note on offers. So you will have the opportunity to rank all available training posts in order of preference in March 26. So at that stage, we'll ask regions for their final post numbers and exact locations of their posts. We do recommend only prefacing posts that you would realistically be willing to accept. We do have a number of candidates in each offer round who end up with offers for training somewhere that they've preferenced and a training post that they then realise that they can't accept. So they have to withdraw at that stage of the process. Initial offers are expected to be made in early April, and then applicants will have 48 hours, excluding weekends, to respond to offers. And then after that, we'll recycle offers every 48 hours going forward up until the hold deadline and the upgrade deadline as well. The hold deadline is set for the 22nd of April. So at that stage, any candidates holding offers will have to make a decision on what they want to do, and all those posts that are declined at that point in the process go back into the pot and then are re-offered out again to remaining candidates. Next slide, please. So if you do decide to reject an offer at the end of the process, it has no bearing on any future applications you may make, as long as that you withdraw the offer or reject it before the start date of the post. If you want to defer your start date, you can only do so on statutory grounds. So, for example, maternity or paternity grounds, or sickness grounds. So as long as it's statutory, then you can apply to defer your start date. Next slide, please. I think that's possibly the end. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Lovely, that's great, Louise. Only 1 minute over, fantastic. So we're doing well. So just as a quick reminder, if you do have any questions, remember to use the Q&A function. Please don't use the chat function because we may miss your questions. So we want to make sure we answer all the questions if possible. So use the Q&A function. Okay, so our final speaker is Nermeen Ahmed, who is the chair of the Psychiatric Resident Doctors Committee, and she's going to talk briefly about entering higher training. So I'll hand over to Nermeen. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Declan. Hi, everyone. I hope you're able to see my presentation. First of all, I want to wish you all the best of luck with the process of applying for higher training. I know it can be overwhelming and stressful, but I hope the information you get from today's webinar make it easier. So I'm Nermeen Ahmed. I'm an ST4 General Adult Resident Doctor. I'm also the chair of the Psychiatry Resident Doctors Committee. I wanted to take the opportunity of being here to do two things. One, introduce you to the PRDC, who we are, what do we do, how do we fit in within your training, and then speak to you about my experience as an ST4 who wasn't long ago in your place applying for higher training. So the PRDC's core role is we work within the college. Looking at our website, looking at who we are and what we do, we are your elected body in the college. There's around 50 reps who are elected across the 4 nations, England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. We also have co-opted roles of medical student reps, foundation year reps, as well as IMGs. We sit on 90% of the college committees because the college needs our involvement. They consult with us regularly on our views on all aspects of our training, where we feel that we have issues, where can the college support us to improve. How the PRDC works is on ground. Our reps will reach out to you wherever you are. They'll get your feedback. They'll feedback centrally within our executive team. For this year, that's myself and my 2 vice chairs, Dr. Jonathan May and Dr. Po Wong. And within our executive team, as chair, I will be feeding back to the college in various committee meetings like ETC, which is our Education and Training Committee, the assessment strategy review meetings, as well as various other meetings that involves examination, curricula, the portfolio, as well as the college's council meetings. Outside of the college, we're also represented in the Academy of Royal College as part of the Resident Doctors Committee. We also attend the European Federation Psychiatric Training meetings, and we're quite involved in some of the working groups that looks at training issues across Europe. And this is a very good opportunity for those of you who are quite keen about international work and exchange opportunities. As a committee, we have some projects, one of which is our magazine, The Registrar. And this is actually your window to reach out to us, to share your views, your experience, what you want to share with the wider Resident Doctors Committee from being in training, out of training, your lived experiences. The Registrar is published 4 times a year, and I do encourage all of you to reach out. You'll also get some updates from the PRDC as to what we're up to within the college, some of the concerns you feedback on, what steps we're taking. Also, we reach out to you on a monthly basis from our e-newsletter, which if you had a look at last week, we actually announced about our next Resident Doctors conference, which is coming to Newcastle. This is another big project for us. It is aimed for resident doctors. It's there to help resident doctors because it's an opportunity for all of us to network. It's an opportunity for us to enrich our knowledge and progress in our training, regardless of what stage that is, core or higher training. Also, the PRDC, or previously known as the PTC, have been working within the college for many, many years. So if you visit our website, you will find a lot of documents that can be helpful and supportive for you in your training. Training can be difficult, and sometimes it can feel isolating and lonely, but we're not isolated and we're not alone. There's a lot of us, and we are a community. We are a supportive community that thrives on resilience of standing next to each other. Have a look at the extra key documents that we have within the PRDC, because it can give you some guidance on opportunities for leadership, like the Royal College's Leadership and Management Fellowship Scheme. It will give you some ideas or guidance on quality improvement projects as well. Previously, we were known as the PTC. So if anyone is keen on knowing more of who we are, what do we do, where you fit in, how can you be involved as well with us, we have the PTC UNU guide on our website. I would like to take this opportunity to say that half of our PRDC reps are coming out for election this year, at least the devolved nation and some divisions in England. So do please consider running for them. And now, more specifically about applying for higher training. So not long ago, I was in your place, and I was quite overwhelmed by the process of applying to higher training and the change that comes with this. Some of you might be applying coming straight out of core training or having had an SAS job, or even as an international IMG. Knowing the system, knowing the portfolio, knowing how do you evidence your progress in training is quite important, and sometimes can be stressful if you don't know how to go about this. My advice to myself and to anyone I always have this discussion with is always be proactive in reaching out to your clinical supervisor, to your educational supervisor. One of the biggest leap that comes with going to higher training is we get more autonomy. We get autonomy in the decisions we make, how we approach our patients, how we approach the management plans we put, but also how do we approach shaping who we become at the end of our training. Regardless of whatever program or subspecialty you go for in training, and the years you spend at the end of it, it will help shape who you are, not just as a psychiatrist or as a consultant, but also as a leader, as an educator, as a researcher, as a supervisor to the resident doctors who are going to follow you and be supervised by you. This is why I wanted to point out your attention to the Resident Doctor's Guide to Professional Development Sessions that the college have recently uploaded on the website. This will give you guidance on what you can do. One of the biggest positives of our higher training scheme is you get 1 day for professional development. You can decide what you want to do this, because this is what feeds into who you become as a consultant at the end. Who do you see yourself? What skills do you want to learn? What skills do you want to be able to evidence? If you go on the college's website under training, curriculum and guidance, you'll find the specialty training guidance in there. My personal reflection on having been in training for almost 3 months, it can be difficult, but making sure that you reach out to get support from your supervisors, from your TPD, even from your fellow resident doctors. Higher training can be very rewarding, and the time we spend here will furtherly shape your clinical skills. So decide on what you want to learn. How do you want to complement your training, depending on which division or which deanery that you're in. Seek out the local opportunities that you have. You have your study leave and you have your study budget, but sometimes the local resources can also be enriching to who you are and what you become. One thing I would like to close with, as I said, training can feel lonely, can feel isolating at times. So please reach out, look after your own well-being. Within the Royal College, we have the psychiatrist support services. Please do reach out. Check out what is the available local well-being support that you have wherever you are. And please do reach out to the PRDC if you feel that there is anything that we want to support you with, you have any questions, or you just want to be involved. I'm going to stay around for any questions, but all the best in what comes next for you.
Thank you very much, Nermeen, and I'm delighted that we have finished on time, which gives us the full 15 minutes for the Q&A session. And also delighted that the Dean of the College as well, Professor Subed Dave, has been able to join us. So he just appeared on screen there. There we go. So thank you, Subed, for joining us as well. I'm sure he'll be able to answer some of the questions. So we're going to go straight on with the questions, if that's okay. So I'm going to ask this question first of all to the panel. So can I ask if oh, hang on, no, it's just moved. All right, the question is, can I ask if I'm currently doing a QI project but unlikely to finish by March, can I get a letter from the QI to the effect that I'm doing the QI? So it's not actually complete, but in the process of being completed. Is that going to count? Louise, I don't know whether you might be best to answer that question. What would your response be to that? Has it got to be completed?
Sorry, my connection just dropped then. Which question was it?
Sorry, yeah. So it's a question about someone who's in the process of doing a QI project, but they're unlikely to finish it by March 26. So can they get a letter from the audit QI department to the effect that they're doing the QI project, or has it got to be completed?
It's got to be completed.
It's got to be completed. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, so I've got a question here about an anonymous question. I received an award for poster presentation during the conference. Where will this score more? Well, I suppose it depends on which conference it is that it's being presented at, doesn't it? Because obviously that's dependent on whether it's a national, international, or regional conference. So we'd need to know. Obviously, you get more score. You get a higher score if it's a national or international conference as opposed to a regional conference. So it just depends on which conference you presented the poster at. Okay, so is there any evidence to suggest that those of you who did CASC a long time ago, before it counted in ST4 applications and all that mattered was passing the CASC, do worse than people who have done the CASC more recently? So people who've taken it more recently will have been aiming for a higher mark to get an ST4 post rather than just aiming to pass. Siba, do you want to comment on this? Is this something we've looked at, or?
I don't think that should make a difference. I mean, Luis will probably be more adept at this. She'll have the data, but I would have thought that, as she's explained, your CASC score is counted based on your cohort, so it's not, doesn't really depend on what's happened. I think the question is probably alluding to the fact that has there been a general inflation in the CASC mark over the years? Actually, that's not true. It does depend very much on the cohort. So we see ups and downs. And then some cohorts do quite well, and then there are others that don't do very well. But then you will be rated based on your cohort score. And is that correct, Luis? So that shouldn't disadvantage anyone based on which particular cohort you've appeared with.
That's correct. Yeah. So we do that to try and sort of rule that out. We do work out median CASC scores in every round as well, because those candidates that sat CASC pre-2014, so it can't be adjusted. It was under the old process, and we do have a handful of those in every round, are awarded the median score of all candidates from that round. So we've looked at the median score over the last few years, and there hasn't been a general shift upwards of that. So I don't think particularly, if there has been, it's anything significant that candidates in later rounds are getting.
Okay. Lovely. So next question, I think it's fairly easy to answer. Is there evidence that the higher the score in your CASC, the highest you increase your chance of getting an ST4 post? If you get a higher score in the CASC, will that increase your chance of getting an ST4 post?
So there's a few questions sort of around this area. For ST4 psychiatry, the way that applications work, it's harder to predict based on your ranking what offer you're going to receive, because you've got the ability to preference across the 6 subspecialties and the 8 dual specialties as well. If you were applying for ST3 obs and gynae, for example, where you're just applying for post and then you're applying for regions, then yes, I would say your rankings have more impact, because generally the London post will go first, etc., etc. We have candidates quite regularly that are ranked 300, 400 that are all getting their first preference offers because they have preferenced a CAMS post or an LD post in a different region that are still available. So it doesn't have as rankings. They are important, but they don't have as much bearing in ST4 psychiatry. Yes, we do have like regions that are generally more popular than we have post for, and we have specialties that are as well. So I'm not saying that it doesn't have any bearing on it, but it is quite hard to predict based on your ranking whether you'll get your first choice preference or not, because it is very much based on what regions you're preferencing post in and what subspecialties as well. So there's a far bigger spread of people with the ranking still getting the first preference for ST4 psych offers.
Okay, next question. This is about self-assessment. So can the self-assessment marks be changed later on? So if they complete a project before the submission of documents, could we increase our score? Or is it just submit once and that's it?
Sometimes people do upload documents that they haven't put in their original self-assessment and then we'll put it into an appeal if they haven't got the marks from that. So sometimes people do that.
Okay. Question here about the cask. Can we find out the spread of cask marks so that we can roughly estimate where we stand for applications?
I think probably Louise covered that. It's really difficult to tell, like just from a cask mark, it's really, really difficult to tell because the applications are, as Louise said, so complicated. I think people get really stressed about sort of where they're going to rank. And I always just say to my trainees, look, you've got to back yourself a little bit. You know, there are certain things that you can change, certain things you can't, but you've got to kind of back yourself a little bit. I think people get really stressed about competition ratios and various other things, but the way the preferencing works, I always just say, look, you put down the jobs that you want, and the way the preferencing works, you'll only ever get offered a job that you want that way, if you see what I mean. I've spoken to trainees who kind of talked themselves out of putting themselves into a job they really wanted because they decided it was too competitive, and actually they probably would have got that job in the end. So I think there's only so much you can worry about. Just put down the jobs that you want and kind of back yourself a little bit.
I suppose kind of leading on from that, Paul, you may or may not sort of have an answer to this, but probably make some general observations. Can you tell us about which locations or subspecialties are more heavily subscribed and popular?
London is always the most heavily subscribed place. Then it's usually, I think, 7. The competition ratios, I think, are, you can sort of have a look on the websites and try and figure some of them out, but it really varies year to year as well. So I'm obviously head of school from Wales, and ours really does vary. It goes up and down. Like some years we have really heavy competition, some years not. And what you will find is that people will sometimes kind of apply. If a place has been quiet last year, you'll get a big slew of applications the next year. So sometimes you can't judge it particularly, but you can probably sort of look at the fill ratios and sort of figure out which ones are popular. They are published somewhere.
Okay, so just to double check, can one audit project be used in 2 domains, such as international presentation and regional change, or is it just one domain for one project?
You can use them in 2 domains, but you've got to put in 2 different pieces of evidence. So for an audit project, if you put in your audit report or your local presentation, which shows the changes that you've made and also a certificate from your audit department, and then you've had a poster at the International Congress and you put that in with your acceptance letter, those are 2 separate pieces of evidence, if that makes sense.
Paul, I wanted to just ask you to clarify about one of the queries that you answered on MD in countries like India. I think as part of the MD, people do a dissertation and thesis and research project. So I think, again, I think it's important that people appreciate where to put in that information. I mean, it may not count as a master's, but I guess it would count as an MD thesis is counted as a publication once it's published, right?
Potentially, you have to look at the scores. So MDs are sort of specifically mentioned because of this. They're done as part of the sort of training schemes. They're not used as the high degree or a PhD or something like that. But if you've done research, then if you get, again, that evidence from your research supervisors to say what you've done in your research project, you can put that in as research, yeah.
We've got a question here about if I've done a master's degree in another specialty from a different country, will that be counted?
Depends what it is, I think, is the thing. So generally we look at the postgraduate degrees that are relevant to medicine. So it would depend a little bit on what it is. The fact it's from a different country is not a problem as long as you've got a certificate from a recognized university and it's not one you just sort of downloaded off the internet, then that's acceptable. But it does depend a little bit on what that other specialty is.
Okay, so a question here. So for evidence such as being a lead AG Scout or Girl Guide group when much younger, what sort of evidence should we put for? Can a support letter or a reference letter serve as evidence, or can one use an old reference letter?
Yeah, reference letter, as long as it's signed on a headed paper from that organisation and it's clearly from that organisation, then that would be seen as evidence, yeah.
Okay. Someone's asking here about, in terms of the leadership role, so someone's leading a clinic in India and continue to do so, but work in the UK as a SAS doctor. Does this help in terms of leadership role? Could that be evidence?
So I think something like leading a clinic, what we're looking for is that you've been appointed to a specific leadership role. So something like a trainee rep or I can't think of another one off the top of my head, but something along those lines. To just say that I led a clinic or I led a team doesn't count. You've got to actually have been appointed to a leadership position.
Okay, so for international medical graduates who attempted the CASC in November in Doha and awaiting results, can we apply without GMC registration?
No.
No.
No. Okay, that's fine. So someone says I was nominated for an award but didn't receive it. Does that help? So can that count?
No, very not.
No.
You got to win it.
You've got to win it. Okay, fair enough. So Yasmin is saying, I received a merit in medical school, 10% in fourth year medical school. Would it be possible to use an official email from my medical school informing me of this as evidence, as I can't find my medical school transcript? So someone has just commented that apparently you can get, if you've lost your transcript, you can pay a fee to get a new transcript from your medical school.
Yeah, usually you can get a new transcript of it, and I would definitely recommend doing that. Emails, look, we ask for signed for signed things essentially, and when we look at saying signed things, obviously people are often getting PDFs of signed documents now rather than actual physical letters. But I think an email is probably, in most situations, wouldn't be seen as acceptable evidence, because I think most people would say that that wouldn't kind of meet that kind of weight essentially.
Okay, someone who's doing a diploma in medical education, does it carry a big weight in ST4 for general adult if it will be completed by March 2027?
Not really. So if you need to have completed the qualification essentially, but if you're doing a med ed diploma, you might have done some projects or things along the way that you might be able to use in the teaching domain, but you wouldn't be able to use the actual diploma until you've received it.
Okay. Can a certificate for presentation at International Congress count towards evidence for international presentation?
Yes, it's International Congress.
Yeah, International Congress. I think
it doesn't matter where it is. It could be in your hometown, but if people from the rest of the world have gone to it, it's the International Congress.
Okay. So Chloe asks, for the evidence, can an electronic signed letter saved as a PDF count, or does it need to be on paper?
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's clearly I think most of our letters are probably produced in that way now, and but yes, as long as it's kind of looks that way, then that should be fine.
Okay. Let me see. Is there any information about minimum scores required or lowest ranking successful applicants for different subspecialties in different localities?
No, there is not. It changes year to year, and it's really variable, as Louise said.
Okay. Question here probably for Namin, actually. Any advice on deciding whether or not to do higher training, particularly after rubbish time in core training some years previously? I'm not sure if higher training is a good idea. Namin, do you want to answer that as a relatively new higher trainee?
It's a difficult question to answer because I appreciate core training can be difficult for many reasons. Sometimes it's the process of having exams, making sure that you're ready for applying for higher training, or it can be the placement itself, and this is where things vary. I'm an advocate for looking after well-being first, because this is what makes a good psychiatrist. If going into higher training is an early step for anyone, taking a gap year is not a problem. Exploring other venues is not a problem. Higher training is always going to be there, but your well-being needs to be looked at right now.
I would just say, I always say that higher training is golden years.
I agree, Paul. I couldn't agree more.
Honestly,
I couldn't agree more with that.
You have a lot more freedom as a core trainee. You can indulge some of your interests. You don't have all the stresses and strains of being a consultant. Honestly, best 3 years I've ever had.
Yeah,
okay.
I would say that as well. I might say that higher training in the UK is considered to be one of the best in the world, and I think with good reason. I think it's a good place to solidify your learning requirements. But I think Nermin's point is very valid. And I think the recent changes in the portfolio route means that if you've done your core training, if you've got your MRSI, that's not going to be wasted. That will count towards your portfolio route. It's kind of a win-win either ways. Each person will need to decide what's best. But the higher training route does have lots of advantages, and you shouldn't ignore that.
Okay. Final question, because it's we're just touching 6 o'clock. So does presenting an audit to a local trust clinical governance team count? Is that going to count for anything self-assessment?
Yeah, in the audit project section, that would count in the audit project section.
Okay. I'm very conscious that we have run out of time, unfortunately. I think we have got through almost all the questions. If we have missed any questions, we will endeavour to answer them and put the answers on the college website. So just to remind you that this webinar has been recorded and the recording will be available in the next week or two. I just want to say a huge thank you to our three speakers today, Paul, Louise and Namin, and to our Dean as well, Zubair Dave, for being able to join us and answer some of our questions posted using the Q&A function. Just to say as well, there is a QR code that has appeared on screen. Please do complete the feedback survey. So it just helps us to look at, are there any ways in which we could make the webinar better for future years? So do scan the QR code and complete the feedback survey. And I want to say a huge thank you as well to the careers team behind the scenes, Claire and colleagues for all the work they've done in putting this webinar together. And with that, I'm going to draw proceedings to a close and say a good evening to you all and very best of luck with applying for higher training. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good luck. And big thank you to you, Declan.